I grew up in Arvada, the kind of suburb that makes you fluent in plowed driveways and borrowed tools. My mother ran a Saturday routine like it was a faith breakfast burritos sweating through foil, a trunk already half loaded with pantry boxes for the church drop, a text to three neighbors about who needed sidewalk salt. My father measured his life in socket sizes and snow tires. From them, I learned two things that kept paying dividends long after I moved into Denver proper: show up when you say you will, and logs don't lie. He meant logbooks from his warehouse. Later, I would mean anything, with a timestamp, syslogs, CIICD histories, badge swipes that hum in the background of a building like a second pulse. By 33, I'd been a DevOps engineer long enough to trust a green pipeline more than a hunch, and to know that when systems fail, they usually do it politely first. I lived in a one-bedroom off Colfax with a view that made winter sunsets look like someone had set the city on simmer. I liked the life I had. Quiet, rhythmic, solvable. Rowan was not quiet. The first time I saw her, she was on a bar stool at Wild Corgi, telling a story about a campaign she'd written for a co-working chain, voice low and tempo fast, like she'd learned to put a hook at the end of every sentence. She wore a denim jacket with a patch that said, "Copy is a muscle." She laughed with her whole face, and everyone nearby leaned into it like a radiator. She was doing freelance copy for startups that wanted to sound less like the software they sold and more like the people they thought they were saving. "I write the version of you that you wish the world believed," she said, when we traded names and the quick life summaries that pass for introductions past 30. Our first date was a walk in City Park because neither of us wanted to shout across a table. We did the standard Denver pilgrimage past the geese and the joggers and the people whose dogs were more professionally outfitted than we were. She made me stop by the fountain and listen to the water like it had an argument worth hearing. When I told her I liked systems because they made loud things predictable, she said, "You make boxes that fit, and I make words that escape them." She said it like a tease, a challenge, a vow. We were good in the soft ways that get you through a February. I made dinners that had sauces and patience. She made breakfasts that tasted like California. On Sundays, I volunteered at a mutual aid pantry in 5 Points, sorting cans, breaking down boxes, bringing bags to trunks while nodding at the same 6 grandmothers who insisted they didn't need help and then bossed us into admitting we did. I invited Rowan. No tests, no scorecards, just a room where routine turns into food. She said, "I'll come next week." Then next week became a manifesto. It landed on her Instagram on a Thursday, on gatekeeping disguised as generosity. A carousel with photos that glowed in that specific Denver light, captions about how rituals at their worst are fences you can't see until you hit them, about how mothers built empires on unpaid labor while men called it Sunday. It wasn't about me, not exactly. It was about rooms that expect you to show up in a pre-approved shape. But I could see my mother's foil-wrapped burritos, my father's lists, my own Saturday muscle memory hanging there in the undertow. I told myself it was work. She wrote narratives. She turned feelings into sentences people saved and screenshotted. I told myself not to be the man who thinks a paragraph on the internet can be a knife. Then she started sessions. That was the word she used. "I've got a late session at the Hive," she'd say, slipping on her jacket, tossing me a kiss, grabbing her backpack that always seemed lighter when she said she was going to write. The Hive was the co-working space she loved because it had plants, quiet booths, and coffee that cost less than $10 but made you think it didn't. She'd been there forever in co-working years and knew the front desk people by their dogs' names. The senior resident was a guy named Nico 35-ish, shaggy hair that never looked accidental, a jawline the UI team could have used as a ruler, and the kind of reputation that gets called community anchored when you don't want to say he owned the room. Late sessions aren't a felony. They're a life. I also worked late. I also watched time slip when the problem in front of me was barbed just right. But a system that used to sing started humming in the wrong key. It wasn't any one note. It was the way her sessions drifted toward night like moths aim for heat. It was the selfie at 11:52 p.m., with a caption about flow and the corner of the photo catching the lobby art of the Hive at Broadway. The stark hexagon mural everyone takes pictures with because it makes work look like something bees would approve of. It was the way she smelled when she came home, bar air pretending it was cedar. I'm trained to avoid drama. Drama is for outages, and PR, my job is meaner and quieter. When a pipeline fails at 2037, you don't write an essay, you read the logs. You find the line that changed when someone thought they were being helpful. So I read, not her phone or her laptop, because that's a kind of trespass I won't justify with hurt. I read what was offered to me by the systems people already chose to trust. It started with an email. "Thanks for referring your guest," one subject line said. Chipper, banal. Inside was a receipt I wouldn't have seen if Rowan hadn't asked me to check her inbox for a contract while she was out. You don't make a career in on-call and recoil at other people's email. You move carefully and close everything you didn't come for. But this one was open already, half-scrolled, and my eye caught on the time. The Hive Broadway Guest Pass, 2256201, Thoudard. Under it, a line, issued by Nico. No big deal. Guests exist. People write together. People like company when they swim in the deep end of their own heads. 2 nights later, she had another session. She posted a drink shot from a bar up the block that doesn't bother to hide its name because the neon is a flex, Fox and the Hen. The glassware is distinct, thick-bellied old fashions with a tiny nick where the lip meets the curve like they decided to give you a landmark. The timestamp said 12,014 a.m. Her stories left out the part between the neon and our front door. When you've done enough postmortems, you learn the dangerous difference between hunch and hypothesis. A hunch ends marriages or makes men into jokes. A hypothesis bothers systems politely and waits for them to answer. I started matching timestamps like I would for a deployment that had learned to be tricky. Her Google Calendar said, "Deep Work Hive from 9 p.m. to midnight, recurring, every other Thursday." The Hive's guest email receipts, because they sent them, and she left them, and I didn't always pretend I wasn't looking. Said Nico added, "You to guest access 23,001 Thoud." Bar posts lived in between, sometimes after. Uber receipts in our joint mail folder. We both used the points for occasional mountains, filled in the rest, rides from Broadway to an address that read Lux Lofts, the kind of building with a name that outpaces what the walls actually do. Uber driver names repeated, the route repeated, the time repeated, systems like consistency. Affairs do too. I invited her again to the pantry. "No tests," I said once more. "No rituals. People need bags and warmth. My mother will scold me for not making enough rice. You can talk to Mrs. Geraldine about her knee." Rowan kissed the air near my cheek and said, "I'm working on something that will help more people than a trunk full of canned corn." I said okay, because I had learned in my family that you do not win people to your way by making small rooms of their good intentions. My cousin Eli showed up with a couch to help me move into a better rental rate in the same building because my landlord liked my punctuality. He's the kind of cousin who finds the pressure point on a stuck bolt with his finger and saves you an hour. We moved my books and the 3 plants I hadn't killed. He said nothing about Rowan because I hadn't said anything yet, and because we are men who grew up building shelves in garages, we deal with weight by giving it somewhere to live. Rowan's manifesto evolved. The next one was about dead tools in living hands. She wrote that a spreadsheet is a leash when a woman holds it under observation. She wrote that men build tests and call them tradition because they need to see you carry their water before they'll call you free. The photos were beautiful. Her hand on a coffee cup, her hair catching late light, a notebook with the word refusal, written where a lens could see it. Her friends' comments were a chorus that overflowed into her DMs. This is the real work. They don't deserve you. I cooked us dinner. She arrived late. I plated it anyway. We ate at our small table with the plants looking like they were on jury duty. I said, "Your late nights." She said, "I get into flow when the city quiets." I said, "Nico's emails come at the same time. 23,001, thou." She blinked, not missing the beat she rehearses when a brand says something inconvenient. We sometimes write together. He's good at structure. I'm good at sound. Opposites are a dance. I smiled because that line had awed me once. I said, "You have rides to Lux Lofts after midnight." She said, "Community lives there. People host salons. You don't get to gatekeep where knowledge happens." I said, "This isn't a gate, it's a hinge." She said, "You're jealous." I said, "I prefer logs." She laughed. The good kind. The one that used to make me lean into it like a radiator. Every engineer says they prefer logs right up until something scary gets written there, she said. And then they prefer the story in their head. I said nothing, because I had learned that silence is a kind of audit. It shows you what a person will do without your prompts. I told myself to wait until I had one piece that felt like an answer, instead of a suspicion wearing a suit. It came a week later, wrapped in a courtesy email with the annoying cheer of a service that wants you to rate your experience. The subject line read, "Your guest access update." Inside, in black on white, plain as a bill, it said, "Nico added you to guest access 23,001,000. Location, The Hive Broadway. Room, Conference 3. There were 3 of them stacked like dominoes, each for different Thursdays, each for the hours she said she was in flow. I printed them out because screens let you pretend. Paper doesn't. I put them with the Uber PDFs because financial services believe in legibility. I added screenshots of her calendar invites because you don't make an argument from memory. You make it from the places memory can't edit. I didn't make a chart. I could have. I didn't tape string across a wall. I didn't need to. The pattern wasn't elegant. It was basic guest access minted exactly when she was alone. Rides to the same building, photos from the same bar, and stories that loved lighting more than they loved details. Each piece alone was nothing you couldn't explain away with a better sentence. Together they were a picture I couldn't rub out. I picked a night when her calendar said deep work and the city groaned under a slow snow. I made stew that would live in the fridge like a plan. I put my pay stubs in a folder, the nice knives in a dish towel, the chargers where I could find them later. I wasn't leaving yet. I was doing what I do when a system has begun to shimmy, the pre-flight. The checklists. You don't yank cables out of panic, you stage a clean failover. Her key rattled at 1037 a.m. She came in with cold in her hair and a smile that expected welcome. She stopped when she saw the papers on the table. "What is this?" I said, "The hours you say you're at." The Hive don't match the hours they let you in. They match the guest pass windows in the middle of the night. You go to Lux Lofts after. I have the routes and the times. I'm not going to ask you for the dialogue. I'm not here for genre. I'm here for the timestamps. She looked at the papers like a bad review. She said, "This is hunter behavior. You were waiting with a gun. Now you're proud you caught something." I said, "This is adult accounting. You've been borrowing against trust after midnight and moving the balance to a place I don't live." She said, "Nico believes in women finding their voice. He creates space for it. Men like you hate that." I said, "Ceasing to lie in front of me does not require hating women." She said, "You don't understand what growth looks like when someone has spent 10 years translating other people." I said, "Growth that requires a guest pass after midnight is called access." We both laughed, bitter and at different jokes. She picked up one of the emails like she could tear the printed time apart and free herself from the hour. She tried a new angle, one I knew from my mother's pantry where everything is both simple and not gatekeeping. You and your family think your volunteer rituals give you the right to score women who won't play. This is the same thing. The paper is your clipboard. The hour sheet is your test. I said, I don't grade anyone. I am leaving the class. I slept on the couch, and she slept in the bed that smelled like both of us, and none of what we thought we were doing. In the morning, I made coffee the way people in my bloodline do when nothing else can be done without breaking the day. We didn't talk until evening because there is a kind of truce that falls when daytime has too many witnesses to your face. She came to the table without her phone. She said, I can explain. I said, don't. She said, you owe me the chance to frame my narrative. I said, I owe you the courtesy of saying it's over while we are still soft enough not to make a scene. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to grin at the phrase, make a scene, because she loves to find the performance under the sentence. Then she didn't. She said, if you leave me because you couldn't survive a woman liking her work after dark, I will tell people you are a jealous man who makes spreadsheets when he feels small. I said, tell them you preferred a key card. She laughed for real then, and then it broke in half in her throat. The next morning, I moved. Not everything. The things that prove I live somewhere, the passport, the 2 hoodies I actually wear, the good skillet, the photos that are not of us. I put the rental office on notice and paid the overlap I had prepared for. I changed autopays for the utilities we still shared and sent her a PDF list of what would get charged on what date, like a man staging a handoff between services. I wrote it in plain English, not engineer, because mercy lives in comprehension. She called it cowardice in a text I didn't answer. She posted a 3-slide thing about men who weaponize accountability. A week later, she posted about insomnia, then about healing, then about building a life that doesn't negotiate with smallness. Nico showed up in fewer photos after that and never sent her frame. The Hive's front desk changed their guest policy and made a graphic about building safety. I saw it because it got passed around in our group chat full of people who appreciate good policy and poor UX. Guest access hours limited to business times, it said. Community thrives in daylight. Someone in the replies said, whose daylight, and left it at that. I started running by Sloan's Lake again, slowly, like I owed the pavement an apology for skipping a season. Work got quieter in my head. The page of mistakes I'd been keeping next to my keyboard missed semicolon, wrong NV var, test suite pointed at staging instead of dev stopped needing ink. I went back to the pantry. Mrs. Geraldine called me baby even though I am nobody's baby anymore. I loaded bags into trunks and watched a little kid in pajamas grip a box of cereal like a prize. Rowan met me once outside the building. She was holding her phone like a rosary. She said, you made me into a villain in your own movie. I said, you made me into an audience in a room I didn't buy tickets to. She said, I thought you were different. I said, I was. She said, I was. She said, I hate you, and I miss when you chopped onions like you were praying. I said, me too. We stood there, 2 people who had learned how to end a thing without making it feed a crowd. She left without throwing anything because she is not that kind of person, and because I had given her nothing to bounce off of. Months pass, the way they always do when you build a life. Expensively, and without receipts, you can pin to your corkboard for meaning. I saw her at a launch for a startup that wanted to make late-night grocery runs into a mood board. She spoke on a panel about authenticity and looked like she was telling the truth. Nico didn't sit in the front row. The Hive's new community lead is a woman who says things like, boundaries are not fences, and the people who need to hear it clap. When people ask me what happened, I say we didn't agree about where honesty starts. If they push, I say keycards and Uber routes. If they won't let it go, I say she called it growth, and the logs called it access. The people who know how to read between lines nod like a gear catching and moving you forward. The ones who don't say, that's complicated. They're right. Things worth living often are. Here's the part I keep for myself when I need to feel like this story has a point beyond my own hurt. Systems tell the truth if you let them. So do people, but some of us need our mouths to be quiet before our hours can. I learned to trust the quiet. I learned that dignity can live in a well-timed exit as easily as it can die in a brilliant argument. I kept my mother's 2 rules. Show up when you say you will. Logs don't lie. When the guest passes, hit the inbox. When the Uber routes echoed. When the bar glassware made its small nick against a mouth I knew, I showed up to my own life on time. I still volunteer on Saturdays. Sometimes the routine feels like a net, and sometimes like a map. I still cook stew when snow decides to be an attitude, and I still put a lid on it at the right minute because that's how you keep the heat where it's supposed to go. I text my father a photo of a bolt when I seat it just right, snug but not strangled, and he texts back a thumbs up because men in my family think emojis are a language that can be learned late. I keep a small list on my fridge because ritual makes sense when it's honest. Coffee, onions, patience, boundaries, call mom. Some nights I add no more after hours because my sense of humor hates me, and I let it. What would you have done? Is Keycard plus Uber plus bar check-in enough to call it? Or do you wait for a confession with teeth? At what point does opposites are a dance? Stop being charming and start being choreography you didn't agree to learn. Drop your thoughts below. If this story hit, please like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with a friend who needs to see how quiet exits can still be loud with truth.